Wondering what it takes to improve your grades and move from the middle to the top of the class? It's not magic, but rather changing how you prepare for your classes and exams. Rather than telling you how to do this, I'm instead going to interview one of my former students who made the jump. He will share his story, including the steps he took to earn high marks. Hello, Lawlings. This is Professor Bo Baez. Today I'm interviewing Mr. Salim Jebeli, a student who ended up at the top of his 1L class. After getting his grade back from my tort midterm exam, he made significant changes and, within 2 months, earned one of the highest grades in my class. After his interview, today's bonus legal fact discusses the time when the government had a financial incentive to convict you for treason. Hi, this is Professor Bo Baez, and today I'm interviewing Salim Jebeli, one of my former students from Northern Illinois University. So welcome, Salim. Thank you for coming on and being willing to be interviewed.
Hey, Professor Baez, thanks for having me. I'm an avid viewer of Learn Law Better, and I admire and respect you as a professor, so I'm excited for this chance to talk about my journey.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, so what we're doing today, this past year, Salim was one of my tort students, and during that time, got to know him. He sat right on the front row. By the way, that's great. I recommend to every person out there to, if you can, if you're willing to sit in the front, I think it really helps. Do you normally sit in the front row? Is that something you've always done, or how did you end up in the front row in my class?
That's a funny story, actually. I was peer pressured into it, and by a fellow student. So I sat in the front row, not exactly thinking I was going to. I usually sit closer to the front, but right in the front row, right in front of you, was not exactly my forte. But I don't regret it for a second because it did help a lot. And then I sat in the front row for all of my other classes as well. I
think it helps. I think the students who sit in the back, it's just easier to stay, to disengage a little bit more, not to pay attention. You start seeing the room, kind of below you when you're at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, for those who are not in a traditional, haven't been to law school yet, oftentimes law schools, we have tiered seating. So you have the first row, and then it kind of moves its way up, like a theater style seating. So the challenge, I think, if you sit in the back is you just see everything. So if people are on their laptops, they're watching sports or something, it's a distraction. So I think it helps to be on the front row. What I want to do with this interview, Salim, is it's really about you. And I think what my audience wants to know is sort of a little bit about your journey. So I want to have them know a little bit about where you started. And I think that means undergrad. So tell me a little bit about your undergraduate experience, maybe major, whatever you want to share about where you came from on your academic journey.
Okay, yeah, great. Mine was a little unorthodox for a law student because I majored in biology, pursuing the pre-med track. So I had a family divided, half in the medical field, half on the law side. So my initial instinct was to go medical. Then I decided I can't learn about the cell any longer. So I took a job after undergrad in a law firm, and that's what jump-started my law school journey.
Oh, interesting. So how much time did you spend out of college before you decided to go to law school?
It was about 2 years.
Okay, so you're a little bit older. Okay, that makes it a little bit different, but I think that's also valuable. One of the things that I've mentioned to my audience and to other students is the human brain doesn't fully develop till you're age 25. So if you can wait a little bit, not everybody can. In your case, it just happened to work out well. You were just a little bit older, a little bit more mature coming to law school. That's great. So, all right, so biology major, and then you decided you liked it. So you took the LSAT and you came to law school. All right, so tell me a little bit so let's just jump into law school. So I think a good way of dividing this is, because this is your academic journey, before midterms and after midterms. So some law schools, not many, but more and more law schools are offering midterm exams. By the way, in the vast majority of law schools out there, you get one final exam at the end of the year. So at Northern Illinois, as in some other law schools, it's nice to get some feedback. So tell me a little bit about what you were doing before midterms, sort of maybe your daily routine, how you were preparing for classes.
Right. So like any other student, I went into law school very ambitious, motivated, wanting to do well, but not knowing what to expect. Before the midterm, I paid attention in class, took great notes, thought I was doing great studying outside of class.
Yeah, like how many hours? So if you had to like maybe your day in review, so like on a typical weekday when you had a class, what was your routine?
Normally I just review my notes and read the cases and case brief them as well. For most, I would say all cases prior to the midterm, still I was case briefing. Not as much using the textbook as I should have, but definitely reviewing notes and case briefing everything.
If you had to say how many hours per week, so excluding class time, about how many hours do you think you were spending on your academic studies?
That's a tough one, but definitely not enough. I would say maybe, some days an hour a day on a day.
Total outside of class?
Total outside of class, an hour.
So then we had midterms. How would you describe your performance on, overall, all your midterms?
Overall, originally the first one we got back was your midterm, and had high expectations, was very disappointed in myself for the grade I received. And I convinced myself that's what it was going to be like for the rest of my midterms, and started asking myself, is law school not for me? And, kind of anxious and nervous what was to come. Then from yours, I really buckled down, and the rest of my midterms went fairly well.
So mine was the first one, and you weren't happy. So, and the other grades then started coming out. So how did you do overall in your other classes? Same level of performance or different?
So I was actually in the top percentile for all the other class midterms that came in. And that was due to the disappointment I faced from your midterm.
So you hadn't had those other exams yet?
No, not yet. Yours was very early.
And you were able then to shift gears and then improve your performance. Good. So tell me a little bit about what you did differently. So how did you prepare for my exam, and then how did you start preparing differently for the others?
For your exam, I just went through the cases kind of briefly. I tried to understand the material as best as I could, like terms, definitions, things like that. Tried to just, formulate the general concepts as best as I could. However, the most important thing I did not do was structure of the essay and how it should be presented. I think that's definitely the foundation. Yes, well, I used a broken version of it was the issue. And I think that was, the main issue, because every professor does look for something different. They are similar in their own ways, but on their exams, they do look for a certain pattern to follow. And then you could put every piece in together from the facts of the case or whatever's presented to you.
Okay.
So that was definitely a huge thing for me.
So you changed your structure. Did you start spending any more time?
Well, yeah, several hours more. I started outlining every single day for every lesson we learned.
Okay.
And you provided a great resource for that, because you kind of essentially had the outlines on Blackboard. So I would just pull it down. It had definitions, sit down with the book and outline every single day, add in whatever, I thought was also necessary for me to understand the concept as a whole. That was, a huge help. So I would say I tripled, the amount of time I spent studying.
You weren't happy with the midterm grade. How did you do at the end of the semester on at least on my final exam?
I received an A, so I was very happy with the grade I did. And as I was taking the exam, it was that feeling of seeing the material and knowing I knew what you were looking for every single, like issue spotting every single way down the prompt.
Just so the audience knows, what you really had to do, because you had a relatively low grade on the midterm, not only to get an A, not only did you have to move your grade up, you had to then basically move beyond other people in the class. So a lot of people may not understand in law school, I have a limited number of A's I can give. So most professors are told you can give X number of A's, so many A minuses, so many B pluses. And so in order for somebody to jump from a pretty average grade on the midterm, it really had to be a really high A on the final exam. So that was a really great accomplishment, because you not only got one of the top grades, but you did very, very well.
One of my goals was actually to have one of the best student answers that you email out to us, and I received that on I think it was the third prompt you gave to us.
Bravo. So I want to go back a little bit from the midterm. So you mentioned you started doing outlining, and you said you started, how many more hours?
Say on average at least 2.
And that was just not class prep, but you started thinking about how you were going to get ready for the final several months.
Exactly. And the quizzes as well, I would study those and study the previous ones from, potentially the day before, class beforehand. Make sure I had an understanding of that. Maybe I got a point off, see why, work through it.
So you actually went back, you looked at the old quizzes, you learned from it, and then you were ready for the next quizzes.
Yeah, I think a huge help as well was studying multiple choice. Because any multiple choice can be turned into an essay prompt, or at least allow you to think the way of how you would structure an essay based off of it. And then it also gets the general concept down for each of the terms, what you're looking for, to not catch you by surprise. In the final itself that you gave us was, I believe, half of it was based on multiple choice, I think, grading wise.
Right.
Yeah. And that was huge for me because I believe I got a 25 out of the 30 on that, which was a huge help.
You determined early on, all right, what kind of assessment am I going to have? And then you were able to take that knowledge and you prepared for that kind of test. Because again, a lot of people just sort of wait till 2 weeks before the final, probably a lot of your classmates did, or some of them, I don't know what percentage. And that really doesn't give you enough time. But by the way, do you think you would have scored a high grade if you had waited to 2 weeks, or do you think you needed all that time of class prep or of exam prep?
If I waited, I would not have gotten nearly as high, but I don't know if I needed the full 2 weeks, but definitely studying ahead of time, laying down a foundation. And something that helped me that I would highly recommend is having a solid group of people who are as dedicated as you are, so you can discuss each of the problems, each of the concepts, even throughout those crazy hypos that you'll see regularly in class with each other, and then discuss how you came to each solution.
So you're part of a study group. Excellent. So because there is sort of the right kind of study group and the wrong kind of study group. So about how many people more or less were in your group?
Yeah, so essentially it was on an average day, it was me and 3 other people.
Did you have a dedicated amount of time that you spent?
Well, it depends on how close we were to the final exam, but as we approached the exam, we were spending about 12 to maybe 14, 15 hours a day studying in a classroom at the school. Just the entire day, we would go get our energy drinks, maybe a snack.
Was it mainly focusing on content to make sure you had the rules right? I mean, what was your discussion like?
So we would each have our own outline prepared beforehand, something we would do personally. Then we come in and discuss each of our outlines and fill each other's outlines in, talk about each concept, try to find a problem on each. Last couple of days, we spend about maybe half the time going through multiple choice using Kali resources or just any multiple choice we could find.
So you found that it was a productive use of your time?
Most of it, I would say 90% of the time, yeah.
Anything else you think another law student, somebody who's getting ready to start their journey, would want to know about your experience and what led you to become a top performer within one semester of law school?
Something I did was I took it very seriously, and I didn't have room for, other people who thought it might be, cool to not study or not just take it as seriously as possible, because you have to treat it as a full-time job. This is, your future here, and set it as your career. Set goals for yourself each time. I want to be, top of the class here. And something I did essentially was reach out to my professors a lot. So I talked to them. If I didn't understand a concept after class, I'd just walk right into their office and ask them questions like, can you help me understand this? And all the professors are extremely helpful all the time in law schools, from what I've gathered. So just putting your right foot forward, I think.
That's great that you had that experience. That was not my experience in law school. And I think for many people, the experience tends to be professors tend to teach class and then they disappear. By the way, it's something you mentioned, and I'm kind of curious. I'd like to kind of peek behind the curtain because you have a different perspective of the class than I do. So did you find there were students who weren't taking it seriously, who weren't spending the time and effort to succeed?
Yeah, definitely. Something that was mind-blowing to me early on in the semester was some students were not even reading the cases coming into class.
Really?
And I mean, yeah, I couldn't even fathom that at first. Like, how can you come into class? I mean, being nervous enough if you do read the cases to make sure you get the right answer if you're called on in class. I couldn't even imagine if I didn't read the cases or didn't have the concepts, or how much work I would have at the end of the semester for the exam if I, just took it as, undergrad.
Were the people in your study group also as dedicated as you were?
Yeah, 100%. All of them were great, and that's the thing. You surround yourself with people who are as focused as you are. All of them did just as well as I did.
One other thing I'm kind of curious about, did you ever do any practice exams, and did you talk about those practice exams with your study buddies?
Yeah, definitely. All the ones that you had posted or any professors post, we would each take, at a different table in maybe the same room or something, and then come together and discuss what we got, why we got it, what we should have gotten maybe. Then there'd always be somebody who knew why that was the answer, and they could say why they thought it was, and then we just discuss it that way. So, and then if we could find any, online, whatever resources we found online, we would, if time permitted, we would try to use those as well.
Say for torts, how many practice exams do you think you took prior to the torts final?
Prior to the torts, so I think you had about maybe 4 or 5 on there yourself.
Right.
And then outside of that, I would say just as much, so maybe 8 to 10.
And you took them under time conditions. You went ahead and said 30 minutes. You went ahead and took a 30-minute exam.
Yep, exactly.
Excellent. And did you take them closed book, or did you do them open book? I know my exams are closed book. So how did you try to mimic exam conditions as well?
Yeah, we try to make it as similar as possible. So closed book, timed. We took it in the classroom, the environment. Yeah, so we just try to make it, least amount of differences as possible as to your exam would be. So focus on the essay last, multiple choice first, whatever we could do to reenact the environment.
So anything else that you'd want to share with the internet and potential law students, or some who may be in law school and kind of figuring out how they can move from the middle of the pack to the top of the pack?
I guess I would say it's okay to be nervous. It's natural to be nervous, but use that to work harder, to reach your goals, set goals for yourself, and then just work as hard as you can to reach those.
Well, thank you so very much. I appreciate your time and willingness to come and do this, and I wish you well as you wrap up the summer and as you start strong in your second year of law school. Take care.
Thank you very much, Professor Bias. Take care.
Now for today's bonus legal fact. From 1351 till 1870, the law of England held that the property of those convicted of high treason were to be turned over to the monarch. This result occurred because England was captured by William the Conqueror in 1066, and all land is held at the pleasure of the king. So by committing high treason, a British subject had his right to own property revoked. To this day, high treason includes the 5 following offenses. 1. Planning the death of the king, his wife, and his eldest son. 2. Violating the king's wife, his eldest daughter, or his heir's wife. 3. Levying war against the king. 4. Providing aid to the king's enemies. 5. Killing the chancellor, the treasurer, or a judge. Sorry, members of parliament aren't covered. Interestingly, this law still applies not only in the United Kingdom, but also in New South Wales and a few other Commonwealth countries. New videos every other Wednesday. If you like the video, please like and share it, and then hit the subscribe and bell button so you can become a better student and a better lawyer.